Hello friends, welcome back to Spiritism for All, and today we continue to study the book Behind the Scenes of Obsession, chapter The Aggressions, first part. The spiritual author is Manoel Philomeno de Miranda and the medium is Divaldo Pereira Franco. For the resolute Spiritist, tranquility of conscience in view of the rightly fulfilled duty is the best prize he can offer himself. This was the state that dominated us, while the tasks to which the Suarez family's problems had called us were underway and which, by God's mercy, we were honored by the opportunity to serve. Not infrequently we were surprised by the evocations, which, although they did not have all the clarity we would like to experience, were presented to us in panels of pleasant memories. Even when memory registered the facts with the dark inks of nightmares, in which fear loomed uncontrollable, we remembered the unmistakable Master, Jesus, what had cost him to descend to man and experience without complaint the coexistence with human passions, bearing the heavy burden from the misunderstandings of those around him, accustomed as they lived to the squabbles of immediacy. The stoicism of Jesus' love gave us strength and courage to go on feeling the happiness of living between the two worlds that intertwined and whose borders are nothing more than a dividing edge, a bright and dark with tenuous colors that is difficult to define and delimit. In this sense, and under several other aspects, Spiritism presents itself to us as the safety road map for the balance of man's spirit. Undoing the illusions of matter and overcoming the transitory shadows that block the visions of the spiritual world, it presents us with the real causes of whose effects, and only in them until now, has the thought of technological research been focused. The rigorously philosophical assertions managed to advance beyond philosophy itself in its classicist ensemble, because in leaving the question pure and simple, the merely empty inquiry and the conjuncture of hypotheses, it brings from metapsychical realities the moral and vital solutions to the enigma man who ceases to be disturbed by the various unknowns, to tread the path of facts, from whose context he extracts the legitimate ontological reality that enables him to move forward without fear, despite the circumstances, conditions, and moral climates under whose constriction we all evolve towards the infinite. Yes, because it's not only men who spontaneously carry out incursions into the spiritual world, but, above all, the ones who defeat it, grave and return, singing the resurrection of life after the mud and ashes of the body, incessantly repeating the undying lesson of Christ on the glorious Sunday morning, right after his death, as a blazing star, thus attesting the indestructibility of the spirit and consequently the successive transformations of life to reach sublimation. A religion of love and hope, a Eucharistic pabulum through which man can commune with immortality, it is the solace of the nostalgia due to the discomfort derived from the absence of loved ones that the tomb snatched but could not silence their voice. Hope of the sufferers who suffer the acid anguish of today, understanding that they are the result of the insanity of the past. However, with their eyes fixed on the splendid vision of tomorrow, which is in their hands to hurry and build, beach of peace on which rests in a happy dynamic the ones distressed and tired of the difficult traffic in the sea of carnal struggles, sanctuary of a spiritual recomposition through a defiant prayer, school of souls, who learn in the study of its precious information and its insuperable lessons the technique of living in order to enjoy the blessing of dying nobly, a recovery hospital for those who escape from duty, who find in the balm of physical, mental, or moral wounds. In it they receive the directive to love and forgive in order to be forgiven and loved by those who they have hurt and wronged. Generous mother's lap in the support of orphanhood, preparing us for the luminous future, since no one is an orphan of the love of our Father, shelter of old age, portal that will soon open the customs of immortality, re-education school where the misery of this or that nature meets the experience of character-shaping work in the service of the fortunes of love, a trace of union between the creature and the Creator, reconnecting and bringing them together until the fullness of peace can sing in each creature, similarly to what the apostle of the people said, "It is no longer I who live, but it is the Christ that lives in me," in Galatians chapter 2, verse 20. The higher responsibilities resulting from the knowledge of Spiritism forge truthful men, legitimate Christians. In them there is no field for the peaceful coexistence of error with righteousness, lying with truth, dissimulation with honesty, loyalty with hypocrisy, detraction with brotherly piety, anger with love. Understanding that to be a Spiritist is to trace the behavior of Christ in his own conduct, following the example of all those who followed him, and as prescribed by the eminent apostle Allan Kardec, the apprentice of the Spiritist lesson is someone in permanent combat for his own moral transformation, spiritual elevation, and mental renewal, with a view to the perfection that beckons us and awaits us. Without a doubt, we felt the fragility of our weak strength and sought refuge in prayer, and in meditation the recovery, drawing energy and vitality to get through the days of the superior work in which we found ourselves, and whose success, in large part, depended on the contribution that we could make. It's very properly asserted that the insecurity of our wall lies in the stone that is poorly placed. If this one is pulled, it's easier to move another one, and so on, bringing down the wall. The Spirit of the Lord, always hovering over all of us, sweeted us and sweets us not to faint in the struggle. Which such thoughts in our minds in the immediate encounter with the excellent interview with Brother Theophrastus, through the crystalline psychophony of the medium Moraes, the benefactor Saturnino explained thus that the spiritual operation in progress, with the consequent displacement of the director of the amphitheater, would soon be reflected among the other components of the various groups of unhappy spirits linked to evil in a negative way, and that as soon as they recovered from the shock, they would attack violently, trying an unjustifiable pernicious rematch with ever more harmful results for them. It behooves us to keep ourselves in the Christ standards to in turn safeguard the superior results of the rescue activities in course. With properly clarified and also fortified, we continued with the usual tasks of Spiritist propaganda when, a week later, we began to experience, almost all of us, the incarnate participants of the blessed work, a singular melancholy and some traces of irritability in behavior. That's very common when you are working with this obsession, when you are working and trying to help the others, help incarnate and discarnate ones, trying to clarify their problems, you become a target of the evil spirits. That's one of the problems of mediumship that Allan Kardec advises us. But we must remember that the light is always much more powerful than the darkness. And if you are weak, we have our guard angel, we have spiritual friends, we have Jesus, Bezerra de Menezes, and Mary, Holy Mary, all of them supporting us in our effort, so we can go on with faith that will be supported. We did not ignore that some of the techniques used by persecutors of tormented incarnates who seek the help of Spiritism are, in several cases, the increase in aggression to their victims in order to give them false ideas that attending the sessions caused them greater dose of suffering, inspiring them to flee, after which then the obsessive constriction suddenly ceases, making them believe that the that the improvement resulted from the abandonment of those sudden commitments to return fiercer, more cruel, more ruthless, when such patients, almost always inattentive, favor the physiological and psychic field with adequate resources for the painful continuation of the insane persecution. So the author explains us that sometimes when you have an obsessed person treated in a spiritist center, it's common that when the treatment begins, the spiritists, the obsessor spirits, try to increase the dose of suffering over the incarnates in order to make them step back, abandoning the help, abandoning the treatment. And when they abandon the treatment, they step back and giving the false idea that the spiritist treatment was making bad results to them, was making them suffer more, than they suffered before. But it's something that you have to explain to the obsessed people that ask for help. They have to stand with us. They have to be strong because they are fighting for themselves. So after the first strikes, you can see the decrease of the attacks, because the evil spirits will be treated through during the subsession meetings. So everybody will be treated, and we must be strong and explain this to the victims. Let's proceed. At other times, they act in a very characteristic way. As soon as their clients start to honestly participate in the study and in the Spiritist tasks of liberation, clients, you can say, the obsessed ones, the obsessed incarnates, either because of the modification in the mental field prevents them from exchange with the same easy, or because of a tactic of bellicose strategy, the persecutors temporarily withdraw, remaining, however, in continual vigilance. The unwary soon experience false liberation, recognize the unnecessary need for clarifying knowledge, and say they are committed to social and other programs, transferring spiritual duties for the future to the future, and live breezily to enjoy. Breezily to enjoy. We have something to explain here. This strategy is very troublesome too, because they step back and give the false impression that the spiritual situation was solved. So the victims forget that they have the counterpart of the treatment, which is to get better, to study, to change their bad thoughts, their bad behaviors, to go forward in their evolution, so they don't come back for studying the gospel, studying the doctrine. They don't try to change their thoughts, they don't try to change their behavior. So after some time, they leave the treatment and they get back to the same problem, and sometimes the problem is worse, because the obsessors will be waiting to attack again. They claim they were recognized or considered the coincidence of the cure exactly when they started to examine their problems under the light of Spiritism, but regret the circumstances that forced them to a temporary leave. When the issue seems to them already over, without the debts have necessarily been rescued, since they did nothing to correspond to the trust of life, the persevering executioners who keep following them return vigorously and causing more constriction, with high doses of ferocity, without the obsessed having any resources in their favor, considering that they have provided nothing for the time of distress and discomfort. We were not unaware that in any process of disobsession, if vigilance, prayer, and moral fasting are essential conditions, optimism and good humor cannot be left behind. Sadness is a cloud in the eyes of health, and irritability is toxic in the tissues of peace. However, we did experience certain psychic shadows investing insistently and constant. Summoned to an extraordinary meeting, Saturnino's words, always ready and luminous, came to our rescue, and as all our lessons and learning is of greater value when the student is a co-participant in the teaching, acting in it, the venerable benefactor kindly admonished us, urging us to resistance against evil, of the evangelical teaching and corroborating the previous warning that the organization's onslaughts would soon be felt as was to be expected. Let us lift our spirits and march together in order to sustain one another, still repeating in a very Christian way, whenever there are two or three people gathered in my name, I will be with them. From the unforgettable lesson of St. Matthew in the chapter 18, verse 20. Joint prayer, the gathering of thoughts, achieves the blessing of brotherhood, and this that of mutual help. It's very easy to break an isolated stick. It's very easy to break an isolated stick, but you can't do the same to a bundle. The Suarez family, completed the loving benefactor, was being invited to new afflictions necessary for their own evolution and a better understanding of their responsibilities as immortal souls. Pain being the best way for men to understand the realities of life, it was quite certain that suffering would do its job. At the end of the meeting, when we had already gone home, Petitinga called us on the phone, inviting us to go to Suarez's home, where an unfortunate event had taken place, and Dona Rosa, very distressed, had asked him for an urgent visit. When we arrived at the residence of Mr. Mateo Suarez, we found the family members overcome with superlative bitterness. Dona Rosa and her daughter, Amália, had returned from the hospital do Pronto Socorro. It's a first aid hospital, where the head of the house was hospitalized and had undergone a delicate emergency surgery. Emergency surgery. Dona Rosa, understandably distressed, explained that she had received information from a friend that Mr. Mateus had been rushed to that hospital in the early hours of the night, as the victim of a scene of bloodshed. She had no details to clarify the situation. The aggressor, who was part of the group of friends of Mariana's careless father, was a regular visitor to the place where her husband used to spend the night in unbridled gambling. The chief of police had left there a few minutes before and had succinctly presented his explanations. He said that he had arrested the antagonist, who was drunk, and that he would be held back until the necessary inquiry was opened, while the condition of Mr. Mateus, inspiring care at the hospital, was still being defined. Questioned about the causes of the aggression, The policeman said that it arose in a small discussion held by the two where Mr. Mateus had accused the opponent of playing with marked cards and using dishonest processes, which had started a heated discussion which resulted in the untimely and regrettable blow of the dagger, which the accused had applied with precision, as if he was led by a powerful hand that activated his forces, considering that he was also a man of almost 60 years of age. This had given the police chief the reasons to close the house and that operated with gambling, what was prohibited by the law. His visit to the home of Soares was intended to collect data that could help him with some background that could clarify different angles of the issue, such as whether there was any old feud from previous altercations within the family. Painfully surprised by the near tragedy that could still result in the Mr. Mateus' discarnation, the noble lady found herself overcome by anguishing expectations. Only the next day could she visit her husband, now in post-operative period. She had been soothed by the emergency room by a kind medical student intern who had followed the surgery and explained to her the good prospects of the operation, which, despite his already tired physiological organization, was so far reacting very well. She turned to Petitinga, begging him for inspiration and help, since, with the news that had arrived at her home abruptly, Mariana had been stricken with a cruel nervous shock, and since then she had been restless, looking wild, with symptoms that seemed alarming to her mother. All were frightened by the occurrence of the aggression to her father and worried about the young woman's condition. Conducted to the room in which Mariana was, kindly attended by Amalia, we had no doubt in verifying the presence of spiritual aggressors interested in creating panic and disturbance in the bewildered family. The psychic environment translated the violent intoxication by fluids of low vibratory content, which gave us the impression of an asphyxiating, burning, and constricting place. To be continued. This chapter is very, very interesting, but it's too long for just one video. So, we expect you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching us. If you like this video, please leave us a like, share with your friends, leave us your comment, and please subscribe to the channel, helping us to grow. Thank you very much.